The year is 1976. Along the Israeli-Lebanese border, chaos reigned, yet a specific kind of silence brought the deepest dread. It began with a distant crack, a single precise rifle shot that would claim a life. Then, nothing. No trace. No witness. Just the chilling knowledge that a ghost was stalking the border, turning every patrol into a gamble against the unseen. On Black Protocol, we explore the hidden operations, the clandestine battles fought beyond the headlines. Today, we uncover the story of a phantom menace, a master of disappearance, whose lethal skill forced a nation to confront an entirely new kind of enemy. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching us from today? Now let's step back to the summer of 1976. Let's step back to the summer of 1976, when the Lebanese Civil War raged, transforming the nation into a crucible of fratricidal conflict. The previous year had ignited a complex, brutal conflagration, shattering the delicate sectarian balance that once defined Lebanon. By mid-1976, Beirut's central government had largely ceased to function, its authority eroded by a multitude of armed factions. This vacuum of power was particularly pronounced in the south, a region that rapidly devolved into a patchwork of control points, checkpoints, and contested territories, where lawlessness provided fertile ground for clandestine operations. It was within this escalating chaos that a specific and increasingly critical problem began to haunt Israeli military commanders, overseeing the security of the Upper Galilee. The concern was not primarily the sporadic Katyusha rocket fire launched by the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, from their bases in southern Lebanon, nor the more frequent incursions by Fedayeen attempting to cross the border to attack Israeli kibbutzim and settlements. These were known threats, part of an ongoing, if asymmetric, conflict. The new problem had a name and a face that was becoming both legendary among Palestinian fighters and lethally frustrating for the Israel Defense Forces, Mahmoud al-Najjar. Al-Najjar was not an ordinary PLO militant. Born in 1945 in the Ain al-Hilweh refugee camp, a sprawling, congested settlement near Sidon, he had come of age steeped in the bitter resentment of the Nakba, the 1948 Palestinian catastrophe that had transformed his family into perpetual refugees. This formative experience, coupled with the daily realities of camp life, instilled in him a profound commitment to the Palestinian cause. By the age of 20, in 1965, his aptitude for precision and discipline had been noted, leading to his selection for specialized training in the Soviet Union. This was part of a broader program through which Moscow provided military expertise to national liberation movements it supported during the Cold War. For 18 months, at a clandestine training facility near Simferopol in Crimea, Soviet instructors refined al-Najjar's inherent talents. They forged him into one of the most precise and formidable snipers the Palestinian cause would possess. When he returned to the Middle East in 1967, just weeks before the Six-Day War, al-Najjar already commanded a skill set that elevated him far beyond the capabilities of an average guerrilla fighter. He possessed an advanced understanding of ballistics, capable of accurately compensating for wind drift, meticulously calculating distances, and utilizing professional camouflage techniques to blend seamlessly into any environment. His field discipline was absolute, and perhaps most critically, he possessed the rare psychological patience essential for a sniper's arduous work. The ability to remain motionless for hours, to wait for the single, opportune moment. Over the subsequent decade, operating initially from Jordan until the PLO's expulsion during Black September in 1970, and thereafter from southern Lebanon, al-Najjar accumulated at least 15 confirmed kills of Israeli soldiers and officers. His signature was unmistakable, a single lethal shot, frequently delivered from distances exceeding 700 meters, typically using a Soviet-supplied Dragunov SVD precision rifle delivered through Syrian channels. What made al-Najjar particularly dangerous in 1976 was not merely his technical prowess with the rifle, but the operational context in which he now worked. The Lebanese Civil War had transformed the southern reaches of Lebanon into a multifaceted conflict zone, a fragmented landscape where the central government in Beirut exercised virtually no practical authority. The PLO, having been driven out of Jordan 6 years prior, had established what was effectively a state within a state in southern Lebanon. They controlled territory, established their own checkpoints, and administered refugee camps that served simultaneously as civilian communities and military bases. For al-Najjar, this unprecedented freedom of movement and operation was a critical advantage. He could move with relative impunity through territory where nearly every village harbored Palestinian sympathizers, where weapons flowed freely across porous borders, and where the pervasive chaos created perfect cover for clandestine activities. His ability to dissolve into this fractured landscape after each operation rendered him virtually untraceable. To fully grasp why al-Najjar's activities compelled the eventual involvement of Israel's most clandestine intelligence agency, it is necessary to understand Israel's strategic posture in 1976. The Yom Kippur War of 1973 had profoundly shaken Israeli confidence. The trauma of that October, when Israel had nearly been defeated by a combined Egyptian-Syrian surprise attack, still reverberated deeply within the national psyche. There was a palpable sense of vulnerability that had not existed before. And now, on the northern border, as Lebanon imploded, the PLO was growing increasingly audacious. Cross-border attacks were escalating in both frequency and sophistication. Rockets were targeting civilian settlements with increasing regularity. And snipers like al-Najjar were creating a pervasive climate of psychological terror among the soldiers who patrolled the border and the civilians who lived within their deadly range. The public, still raw from the casualties of 1973, had zero tolerance for losses that appeared preventable or unaddressed. Al-Najjar had developed an operational methodology that rendered him exceptionally difficult to track. He consistently avoided attacking from the same location twice, meticulously varying his positions and approach routes. Following each operation, he would vanish for weeks, dissolving back into the chaotic landscape of southern Lebanon. Israeli attempts to ambush him consistently failed, suggesting he possessed a preternatural instinct for detecting traps and avoiding surveillance. Israeli military intelligence had tracked al-Najjar sporadically since the early 1970s, but all efforts to neutralize him had proven unsuccessful. Conventional military responses, such as artillery strikes or aerial bombardments, were problematic. Al-Najjar invariably operated in close proximity to civilian areas, and Israel, under constant international scrutiny, particularly after the widespread criticism following the Yom Kippur War, could not afford to risk massive collateral damage. The political and diplomatic ramifications of civilian casualties were too severe. This left a critical dilemma: how to effectively counter a ghost who struck with precision and then vanished, an unseen force that conventional military tactics simply could not eliminate. The elusive nature of Mahmoud al-Najjar presented Israel with a formidable challenge. Conventional military might was rendered largely ineffective against a phantom operating within a chaotic civilian landscape. The prevailing sentiment within Israeli defense circles was one of growing frustration, coupled with a grim understanding that a new approach was required, one that operated in the shadows, mirroring the elusive nature of the enemy himself. The problem, for Israel, was how to stop a phantom threat without igniting a broader, more costly conflict that the nation was not prepared for in 1976. This need for an unconventional solution eventually led to the involvement of the Mossad. The decisive turn in the protracted hunt for al-Najjar arrived in April 1976, originating from an improbable source. The operational breakthrough came in the form of crucial intelligence provided by an individual identified in classified files only by the codename Phoenix. Phoenix was an officer within the Maronite Christian militia of the Lebanese forces, a faction locked in a brutal sectarian war against the PLO and various Muslim forces for control of Lebanon. This internal conflict, a tapestry of shifting alliances and deep-seated animosities, inadvertently created an opportunity. In the bloody struggle for Lebanon's future, the enemy of my enemy, while not an ally in the traditional sense, could certainly become a useful conduit for intelligence. The Lebanese forces, under the charismatic and ruthless leadership of Bashir Gemayel, viewed the burgeoning PLO presence in southern Lebanon not just as a territorial encroachment, but as an existential threat to Christian hegemony and identity. They were fighting for survival, and any information that could degrade the PLO's capabilities was a valuable commodity. Phoenix maintained clandestine contact with the Mossad, a relationship built on a transactional foundation of shared strategic interests and mutual animosity toward the PLO. These were not agents of friendship, but of necessity. During one of their secret coordination meetings, held in a nondescript safe house in a Christian-controlled border village, Phoenix delivered information that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of the hunt for al-Najjar. He reported that al-Najjar had been observed multiple times in the region of Marjayoun, a town in the extreme south of Lebanon. Marjayoun, predominantly Christian, found itself increasingly under pressure from Palestinian forces. More specifically, Phoenix reported that al-Najjar was consistently utilizing an ancient, abandoned Maronite church known as St. Michael's Church. The church was perched atop a hill, offering a commanding, unobstructed view over the valleys that snaked their way towards the Israeli border, approximately 5 kilometers north of the demarcation line. The church itself had been abandoned in 1975, its local Christian community having fled the escalating sectarian violence, leaving behind only crumbling stone and overgrown vegetation. Its bell tower, a formidable stone structure nearly 28 meters tall, presented an almost perfect position for both observation and attack over the routes that Israeli patrols routinely used. The strategic value of this location was immediately apparent. This critical piece of intelligence was shared with the Mossad in May 1976, during one of the periodic, highly secretive coordination meetings Israel maintained with various Lebanese Christian factions. The information was vetted and cross-referenced with existing intelligence files. The implications were immediate and profound. If accurate, this pinpointed the ghost. The situation was instantly escalated to a top priority. The urgency was underscored by recent casualties. 4 Israeli soldiers had been killed in March and April by long-range sniper fire. Forensic analysis of the bullets and wound patterns confirmed that 3 of these deaths had come from the same weapon, a weapon whose unique ballistic signature pointed directly to al-Najjar's Dragunov. The internal political pressure on Israel's government was mounting significantly. The Israeli public, still traumatized by the losses of 1973, had zero tolerance for further casualties that appeared to stem from a persistent, unchecked threat. The silence of the sniper was breeding fear, and that fear was translating into political demands for action. The Mossad assigned the operation to its Caesarea division, the elite special operations unit responsible for selective assassinations and high-stakes clandestine interventions. The officer chosen to lead this sensitive mission was David Arbel. At 41 years old, Arbel was a veteran with extensive experience in operations within Lebanon, dating back to the 1960s. He was not merely a desk officer. His field resume was exceptional. Arbel had participated in the retaliatory operations following the massacre of Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics in 1972, part of the infamous Operation Wrath of God, which systematically hunted down members of Black September across Europe and the Middle East. This experience had honed his skills in meticulous planning, covert infiltration, and ruthless execution. He knew Lebanon intimately, spoke fluent Arabic, a critical asset in navigating the country's complex social and political landscape, and possessed a nuanced understanding of the intricate sectarian dynamics that govern that fragmented nation. Arbel was known for his calm demeanor under pressure and his strategic mind, capable of seeing not just the immediate tactical challenges, but the broader geopolitical implications. The first phase of the operation, initiated in early June 1976, was to establish comprehensive surveillance and rigorously confirm Phoenix's intelligence. Arbel coordinated a multi-layered observation network designed to be as unobtrusive as possible. This network included dedicated Israeli observation posts positioned on their side of the border, equipped with the most advanced long-range optical telescopes and early-generation thermal imaging devices available at the time. These posts maintained continuous watch over the Marjayoun region. In addition, rudimentary reconnaissance drones, more accurately described as remote-controlled aircraft equipped with basic cameras, were deployed for aerial sweeps, though their effectiveness was limited by technology and range. Crucially, the operation leveraged human intelligence through Phoenix's existing network of informants within Lebanese territory. These observers, often local Christian civilians motivated by a combination of anti-Palestinian sentiment and financial incentives, operated under the guise of returning refugees. They would occasionally venture back to abandoned properties in their former villages, ostensibly to check on their holdings, but in reality, they were tasked with gathering specific intelligence on the church. Throughout June and July of 1976, these varied sources provided a continuous stream of reports, which Arbel and his team meticulously analyzed. The network confirmed that al-Najjar was indeed utilizing the church as an operational base. The reports painted a clear picture. Al-Najjar had transformed the ancient bell tower into a professional sniper's hideout. Access to the church was typically gained through a discreet, overgrown entrance at the rear, obscured by wild vegetation and crumbling walls, making it difficult to detect from a distance. He did not remain there permanently. His modus operandi dictated that he would return periodically when planning new operations, often spending several days at a time. During these stays, he would bring essential supplies, including rations that allowed him to remain self-sufficient for days if necessary, sophisticated optical observation equipment for long-range target acquisition, and of course his Dragunov SVD rifle. The choice of the church was strategically brilliant, demonstrating al-Najjar's keen understanding of the local political and sectarian landscape. Being located in predominantly Christian territory, PLO patrols rarely ventured into the immediate vicinity of the church, respecting the delicate sectarian sensitivities and avoiding unnecessary confrontation with local Christian militias or communities that still clung to the area. This effectively created a de facto safe zone for al-Najjar. Furthermore, Israel would be highly reluctant to bomb or shell a church without irrefutable evidence of its use as a military target, and even then, the risk of causing civilian casualties or outrage over targeting a religious site was extremely high, a risk al-Najjar meticulously avoided providing them. He understood that the church's status as a religious site offered a layer of protection, making direct military engagement by Israel improbable without significant international outcry. This calculated exploitation of both sectarian dynamics and Israel's operational constraints highlighted al-Najjar's intelligence and adaptability, turning an abandoned holy site into an impregnable fortress for his deadly work. The intelligence reports emphasized that simply bombing the church was out of the question, given its sensitive nature and the potential for a propaganda disaster. The Phantom, it seemed, had found his sanctuary. The problem of how to stop him now shifted from tracking him to extracting him from a highly protected, almost sacred stronghold. The intelligence confirming St. Michael's Church as al-Najjar's operational base brought clarity, but also presented a new, complex dilemma for Israeli command. The Phantom had been located, but his sanctuary was a sacred site, rendering conventional military responses impossible. A ground incursion into Lebanese territory, particularly in a region under strong PLO influence, was out of the question in 1976. Unlike later years when Israel would establish direct control zones, any overt troop movement at this time would be immediately detected, triggering a broad confrontation that Israel desperately sought to avoid. The nation was still recovering economically and militarily from the Yom Kippur War. There was no appetite, political or strategic, for another large-scale engagement in Lebanon. Similarly, an aerial bombing or artillery strike, while militarily feasible, carried an unacceptable political cost. Targeting a church, even an abandoned one, would be a public relations disaster for Israel, generating international condemnation and potentially fueling anti-Israeli sentiment across the Arab world. Al-Najjar had, by choosing this location, weaponized the very sensitivities Israel could not afford to violate. The problem had shifted from finding a ghost to neutralizing him in a location that was off-limits to overt military action. The solution came from a more subtle, clandestine approach. David Arbel, recognizing the constraints, initiated a delicate operation through Phoenix, the Maronite Christian militia officer who had provided the initial intelligence. Phoenix served as the crucial intermediary, a bridge between the Mossad's operational needs and the complex human landscape of southern Lebanon. Through Phoenix, the Mossad identified and established contact with a Lebanese Christian civilian named Georges Khoury. Khoury was a carpenter in his late 40s, known for his skilled work on churches and other communal buildings in the Marjayoun region before the Civil War had engulfed the area. He possessed an intimate knowledge of local architecture and materials, having performed maintenance work on St. Michael's Church itself in quieter times. Khoury's motivation to cooperate with a foreign intelligence agency was a complex tapestry woven from several threads. Paramount among them was a generous financial incentive, a sum substantial enough to offer his family a measure of security in a collapsing economy. This was not a small consideration in a country where livelihoods were being systematically destroyed. But money alone was insufficient to compel such a risky act. Khoury also harbored a deep-seated resentment against the PLO. His community, like many other Christians in the South, had suffered immensely from the escalating Palestinian presence and the ensuing sectarian violence. He had seen friends displaced, businesses destroyed, and the fabric of his traditional society unravel under the weight of the conflict. The PLO, once viewed by some as liberators, had become an oppressive occupying force in the eyes of many Lebanese Christians. For Khoury, assisting the Mossad was not necessarily an act of loyalty to Israel, but an act of resistance against those he perceived as having ruined his homeland and displaced his people. It was a pragmatic alliance born of shared grievance, not shared ideology. He was explicitly told the target of the operation was a dangerous PLO operative, a sniper who had caused many deaths. This information resonated with his personal suffering and solidified his resolve. The core of the operational dilemma lay in developing a device that could eliminate al-Najjar without betraying its source or causing widespread structural damage. Mossad technicians were tasked with an engineering challenge: create an explosive that was precise, lethal, and discreet. In their covert labs, engineers developed a specialized explosive device based on shaped charge technology, which was still relatively new and evolving in the mid-1970s. Unlike conventional explosives that create a broad destructive blast, shaped charges are designed to focus their energy in a specific direction, creating a high-velocity jet of material capable of penetrating armor, or, in this case, maximizing destructive force within a confined space. The device was meticulously designed for the specific environment of the church's bell tower. Its primary objective was to maximize lethality within the enclosed stone space where al-Najjar operated, ensuring that anyone present would be neutralized instantly. Simultaneously, it was engineered to minimize visible external destruction to the church structure. The goal was to create an ambiguity around the explosion, to make it appear as if the damage could have been caused by an internal accident, a structural collapse in an old building, or a small localized event in the general chaos of the Civil War. This plausible deniability was crucial to avoid international outcry and to prevent the PLO from having clear evidence of Israeli involvement. The device itself was compact, about the size of a small toolbox, and ingeniously camouflaged. Its outer casing was crafted from materials that mimicked old, weathered wood and crumbling stone, designed to blend seamlessly with the accumulated debris and decay within the abandoned church tower. It would be virtually indistinguishable from its surroundings to anyone but the most thorough, trained eye. The activation system was also dual-layered, a primary trigger mechanism designed to respond to a short-range radio signal, ensuring immediate detonation when al-Najjar was confirmed to be in position. This signal could only be transmitted from within 200 meters of the church, requiring an operative to be dangerously close, but providing precise control. As a backup, a time destruct mechanism was incorporated. This timer would detonate the device after 45 days if it remained unused, ensuring that no evidence would fall into enemy hands if the operation was prolonged or abandoned. The technology of 1976 was more rudimentary than what would be available decades later, but for this specific, custom-engineered task, it was sufficiently sophisticated and robust. The day of Khoury's mission arrived on August 15, 1976. The morning air was heavy with the distant sounds of intermittent shelling, a grim soundtrack to daily life in southern Lebanon. Khoury, dressed in his worn work clothes, approached St. Michael's Church carrying a battered toolbox and a small bundle of materials, some planks of wood, a bag of plaster mix, a few lengths of rope. He looked exactly like a carpenter returning to check on an old, familiar building, perhaps making small repairs to prevent further decay. He had rehearsed his cover story and movements meticulously, advised by Phoenix and Mossad handlers. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and grim determination. He knew the risk he was undertaking. Discovery would mean certain death, not just for him, but potentially for his family. He accessed the church through the overgrown rear entrance, just as intelligence had predicted al-Najjar would. The interior was dark, damp, and filled with the stale air of neglect. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of sunlight filtering through cracks in the stone. Khoury spent approximately 4 hours inside the bell tower. Part of this time was genuinely spent on performing minor, visible repairs, patching a crumbling section of wall, securing a loose wooden railing, to establish the legitimacy of his presence, should he be observed by any passing villager or PLO patrol. The rhythmic sounds of his hammer and saw echoed faintly, creating a natural cover for his true objective. With precise, practiced movements, Khoury then proceeded to the critical task. The Mossad's intelligence had identified a specific wooden support beam within the tower as al-Najjar's preferred position for setting up his rifle and observation equipment. It offered the best sight lines and stability. Khoury carefully installed the explosive device onto this beam, meticulously positioning it to ensure the shaped charge would direct its lethal force towards the exact spot al-Najjar would likely occupy. He then painstakingly camouflaged the device, artfully blending its textured exterior with the accumulated detritus of the ancient tower. Fragments of old wood, dust, cobwebs, and small pieces of crumbling stone. He worked with a carpenter's precision, ensuring that the device was not just hidden, but became an organic part of the decay. Before leaving, he checked his work from multiple angles, ensuring no telltale signs of its presence. He then left the church, his tools clanking softly, his face betraying nothing of the deadly secret he had left behind. With the device now in place, the operation entered its most tense phase, the waiting game. Arbel established a permanent surveillance posture, utilizing a combination of human observers positioned discreetly in nearby hills and the advanced optical equipment at the Israeli observation posts across the border. Every flicker of movement around the church, every distant sound, was scrutinized. The Mossad knew al-Najjar's operational patterns were highly unpredictable. Professional snipers did not adhere to predictable schedules. They waited for ideal conditions, the right light, the opportune target, a moment of weakness or complacency. Weeks passed without movement from al-Najjar. The silence emanating from St. Michael's Church was profound, yet it was a silence pregnant with anticipation, a testament to the deadly trap now set within its ancient walls. Arbel and his team understood that their target was patient, but they too had to embody that same, unyielding patience, knowing that the smallest misstep could unravel months of painstaking work. The hunt for the ghost had entered its final, most dangerous stage. The waiting game, meticulously orchestrated by David Arbel, stretched through the humid late summer days of 1976. Weeks passed since Georges Curie had planted the device, each day a test of patience for the Mossad team and their observers. The silence from St. Michael's Church was a heavy presence, a stark contrast to the distant, irregular sounds of conflict that were the norm in southern Lebanon. Al-Najjar, true to his unpredictable nature, remained out of sight. Then, on September 11, 1976, the quiet vigil was broken. As dawn began to spread over the hills of Marjayoun, a report crackled through secure channels from Phoenix. Mahmoud al-Najjar had been sighted entering St. Michael's Church. The Israeli observation post across the border visually confirmed the report. A lone figure, moving with practiced stealth, used the overgrown rear entrance, disappearing inside the ancient stone structure. Despite the confirmation, Arbel did not issue an immediate activation order. His experience dictated caution. A civilian might enter the church. An operative would behave differently. Arbel decided to wait, to observe the figure's behavior for hours, distinguishing a transient presence from a combatant establishing a position. 2 hours passed, then 4, then 6. The figure did not re-emerge. Instead, observers reported subtle movements within the bell tower's narrow apertures, faint shifting, an almost imperceptible shadow. These were the hallmarks of someone establishing a long-term observation post, preparing for a mission. The tension in Arbel's command post was palpable. At precisely 1:15 p.m. local time, a routine Israeli patrol began its movement along a designated route in the valley below. This patrol, a regular security measure, moved openly, unaware of its role in the unfolding drama. They were involuntary bait, a necessary component to draw al-Najjar into position, but compartmentalized from the true nature of the operation. The decisive moment arrived swiftly thereafter. As the patrol proceeded, catching the full force of the midday sun, observers at the Israeli post detected a characteristic reflection, the telltale glint of sunlight on optical lenses, the unmistakable shimmer of a rifle scope being adjusted. It was a minute error, but the unequivocal confirmation Arbel needed. The ghost was in position, preparing to strike. Arbel's voice was calm, almost detached, as he issued the order. Activate. An anonymous Mossad agent, strategically positioned in a safe house within a nearby Christian village, approximately 170 meters from St. Michael's Church, raised a small device. With a click, he activated the short-range radio transmitter. The signal traversed the ancient stone walls and reached the receiver integrated into the explosive device Georges Curie had placed. The detonation within the bell tower was instantaneous and devastating. The shaped charges created a concussive wave and a lethal spray of fragmentation in the confined space. From the outside, observers reported a brief, intense flash of light through the tower's openings, immediately followed by a choking cloud of dust and pulverized stone. A muffled thud echoed across the valley. Crucially, the external stone structure of the bell tower remained largely standing, damaged but recognizable, its overall silhouette intact. The ambiguity of the event was preserved. The Israeli patrol, oblivious, continued its movement. Their role was concluded. In the immediate aftermath, a sense of confusion pervaded the local Lebanese community. Residents heard the explosion, but in a region accustomed to constant violence, many did not immediately investigate. It took almost an hour before local civilians ventured close enough to discover the scene. There, amidst the pulverized stone, twisted metal, and splintered wood within the bell tower's ruins, they found the mangled body of Mahmoud al-Najjar. The immediate threat he posed had ceased to exist. The reaction from the PLO leadership was a complex blend of fury and strategic confusion. They knew they had lost one of their most valuable snipers. However, the exact nature of his death was profoundly ambiguous. Explosions in old buildings could have multiple causes in the chaos of the Lebanese Civil War. PLO investigators scoured the wreckage, finding fragments of a professionally manufactured device, pointing to Israel but lacking direct proof. To publicly declare it an Israeli assassination would be to admit a profound security failure. To remain completely silent was impossible. On September 13th, the PLO issued a vague communiqué. The martyr Mahmoud al-Najjar fell defending the Palestinian cause against Zionist aggression. This deliberate ambiguity preserved a facade of invulnerability. Israel, for its part, maintained absolute official silence. There was no confirmation, no celebratory leaks. To claim public victory would invite retaliation, risking an escalation of conflict in Lebanon that Israel did not want in 1976. Within Israeli intelligence circles, the operation was considered a resounding tactical success. Yet, the use of a religious structure, even an abandoned one, created problematic precedents. Ethical discussions, though pragmatic, did occur. Some officers voiced concerns that this might justify similar PLO operations against synagogues. Others countered that the church was abandoned, desacralized by al-Najjar's use of it as a military installation. The Israeli response was directed against a combatant in a military position. The immediate strategic effectiveness was undeniable. For months following September 1976, there was a dramatic reduction in long-range sniper attacks. PLO operatives recalibrated their security protocols. A psychological victory had been achieved. However, unintended consequences also emerged. Al-Najjar's death, coupled with the PLO's ambiguous announcement, elevated him from a skilled combatant to a legendary martyr. His story, the sniper of the church, was rapidly incorporated into the Palestinian narrative of resistance. This mythification inadvertently aided PLO recruitment efforts. In the long term, the operation contributed to a hardening of Palestinian operational security, making groups more difficult to penetrate. Paradoxically, the success sowed seeds for future Israeli intelligence challenges. The cost-benefit analysis of such operations is complex. Tactically, it was a success. Target neutralized, zero Israeli casualties, plausible deniability maintained, escalation averted. Strategically, the results were ambiguous. The elimination of one sniper did not fundamentally alter the balance of power or resolve the underlying conflict. The case of al-Najjar illustrates the evolving nature of modern warfare, where lines between combatant and civilian, battlefield and civilian zone, are blurred. Al-Najjar operated in civilian clothes, in territory not formally at war, attacking military targets from a formerly religious site. Israel responded with a clandestine operation violating sovereignty, using civilians as assets, and employing lethal violence without legal process. The bell tower of St. Michael's Church, partially damaged but structurally intact, stood as a silent testament to this secret war for years after 1976. It was finally and completely destroyed during a bombardment in the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. For those who knew its history, it was an involuntary memorial to the hidden war. The true question that lingers is not whether the operation was technically successful, but whether such tactical successes contribute to strategic resolution or merely perpetuate self-sustaining cycles of violence. Mahmoud al-Najjar was eliminated. Other snipers replaced him. Israeli soldiers continued to die. The conflict continued and continues to this day. The distant flash, the muffled report, and the subsequent cloud of dust over St. Michael's Church marked the precise moment the ghost of the border was finally silenced. Mahmoud al-Najjar, the elusive sniper whose single, lethal shots had terrorized the Upper Galilee, had been neutralized. His body, found hours later amidst the rubble of the bell tower, was a testament to the Mossad's intricate and patient operation. Israel maintained its strategic silence, allowing the truth to dissolve into the fog of war. The PLO, grappling with the loss of a legend and the ambiguity of his demise, issued a vague communiqué, cementing al-Najjar's place not just as a fighter, but as a martyr. This operation stands as a chilling testament to the unseen battles fought in the shadows of conventional conflict. It was a tactical triumph, an immediate alleviation of a pressing threat, achieved without overt military engagement or Israeli casualties. Yet, it reveals a deeper, more enduring paradox. In the complex tapestry of perpetual conflict, such victories often sow seeds for future challenges. Al-Najjar's death, while ending one chapter of violence, simultaneously birthed a new legend, hardening the resolve and operational security of those who followed. The blurred lines between combatant and civilian, sacred space and military target, were not clarified, but deepened, illustrating the profound moral and strategic dilemmas that linger long after the smoke clears. The bell tower of St. Michael's, a silent witness to this clandestine act, eventually fell completely years later, a poignant symbol of a war without apparent end. In the intricate calculus of intelligence and counterinsurgency, where does tactical success weigh against strategic consequence? What does the story of Mahmoud al-Najjar and the operation against him reveal about the enduring nature of asymmetric warfare? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Black Protocol for more deep dives into the true crime of geopolitics.